Marvel's What If just wrapped its second season, and I was looking forward to this. I really thought it wasn't going to come out this year, but then it came out. They released every episode from December 22nd to December 30th, and I was enjoying every minute of it, just watching a new episode every day. Like, that was new to me, and What If is one of my favorite Marvel shows. Well, it's one of my favorite Disney Plus Marvel shows. And we all remember that first season. Like, I just love the concept of, well, one, I like anthology shows, but I love the concept of taking these different points in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and taking a different turn, like, what if this happened instead of this? And that's what I loved about that first season. But I will say, of all the things I loved about it, it did get a little depressing at times. But watching this, it was a little bit less depressing. Like in the last season, I thought the Doctor Strange episode was depressing. The zombie episode, as fun as it was a bit depressing by the end. The What If Killmonger 1 episode 1 was a bit depressing. And especially the Ultron winning episode was depressing. But here I just felt like they wanted to focus on just being a little bit more fun and not putting people in bad moods or depressing moods, which I do appreciate, but I feel like it kind of loses some of that stakes. But overall, I did enjoy this season. But there are some things that I still didn't like about it. But for the things I did like, of course, the animation, the artistry that's on display this season, I feel like it's even better than it was in the first season. I felt the season, it started out strong, but then it kind of took a dip towards the end. But then by that finale, I felt like it did kind of pick up once I saw where everything was going. And it's crazy how during those last couple of days of 2023, I've just been on a Jeffrey Wright binge, because between American Fiction and now this show, I've just been consuming content with Jeffrey Wright. But I love Jeffrey Wright as the Watcher. He's a great voice actor, and the Watcher itself, he's one of my new favorite Marvel characters. Like, he's one of my favorites that I made a whole painting dedicated to the Watcher. And he's my favorite character because I just feel a little bit more relatable to him outside of both of us being bald, but just him just being there, just watching all these different realities. I just feel like that's basically me just watching movies and TV. Now, there are some returning characters such as Captain Carter and Doctor Strange Supreme to have some of the episodes connect with each other. You got to bring back some of those characters from the first season and see how they're doing, which I did appreciate. And what I also like about this show is how they bring in the original actors from the movies to voice their respective characters. But of course, you got the actors that are either no longer in the universe or too expensive to bring back, like Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, and Scarlett Johansson. Like, those are the three that they brought in other actors to voice them. Though, to be fair, I feel Lake Bell, she does play an excellent voice of Black Widow. And from what I heard, the voice actor that plays Tony Stark / Iron Man, he's voiced that character in other Marvel cartoons. And some complaints I do have about this show overall is just, I felt, as much as I loved all the pop culture references, I did feel like it started to get a little bit overwhelming to a point where it was like, all right, this is a bit too much. And let me be clear, I am all for female characters. I'm all for female empowerment, but I just feel like there is a bit too much of an emphasis on the female characters this season. But I'm not complaining about it. It just feels like, all right, can we just have just a little bit more balance? Because we had Captain Carter, Black Widow, Kahori, Nebula, Hela. All right, now let's get into all the episodes. Because for the first season, I did dedicated reviews of each episode, but I'm just not going to do that, mainly because of the holidays. And two, it's just a little bit too much work. So I'm just going to briefly break down every episode and tell you what I liked and what I didn't like. So episode 1 was the Nebula episode, in which she is working for the Nova Corps, and I like the vibe of this episode, in which it is a Blade Runner vibe. I like basically how we have an alternate version of the Guardians of the Galaxy, which consists of Nebula, Howard the Duck, Korg, Groot, and it maintains the silliness of the cosmic side of this universe. Then the next episode is the Peter Quill and the 80s Avengers. Now, I'll say this one took a bit of a turn that I didn't expect, because when I heard about this episode, I thought it was basically going to be like an evil child just realizing how powerful he is, and he's just going to fuck off on everybody. But then towards the middle of the episode, he kind of has a change of heart, and he's just a grieving child. And once he interacts with Child Hope Van Dyne, that's when everything changed. And as far as the 80s Avengers, I did like this little batch of characters right here, in which you have Peggy Carter from the 80s, Howard Stark from the 80s, the Winter Soldier, in which it took Howard Stark for Winter Soldier to come back to the light. You have Hank Pym as Ant-Man from the 80s after he lost Janet Van Dyne. Even Thor comes into play. And I just like the placement of this, in which it takes place in the late 80s. The Christmas episode, in which you have Angry Happy Hulk Hogan. And clearly this episode was inspired by Die Hard. But they bring back Justin Hammer, which is a character from Iron Man 2, and I felt like deserved just a little bit more screen time, and so they give it to him here, and he is just excellent. They maintain the spirit. He is on par with the character he was in Iron Man 2. We get even more puns and callbacks to classic movies, particularly classic 80s movies. Kat Dennings returns to voice Darcy, and this different version of Happy Hogan. I just did not expect that and wonder if we'll see him in the movies, but overall, that was a fun episode. Then we got the Gamora and Tony episode, which was the episode that was supposed to be in season 1, but they didn't have time to finish it before the season aired, and so they saved it for season 2. And this version of Gamora was introduced during the last 2 episodes of season 1, but Zoe Saldana did not come back to play the voice. But this episode is mainly focused on Tony Stark, and after the events of the first Avengers, he gets sent to Sakaar, and now he has to try to get back. And Gamora, who is still working for Thanos, he brings her back to the light. Then there's the Captain Carter episode in which she finds the Hydra Stopper, who is Steve Rogers. And what I like about this episode is basically if Captain America the Winter Soldier and the Black Widow movie went splat with each other. Kind of like how in the last season, how with the Killmonger episode, it was basically Iron Man 1 and Black Panther 1 would splat with each other. This show is basically addressing the Black Widow movie with Yelena, played by Rachel Rice, which I also did not expect to show up. But I just like how they acknowledged this movie and incorporated it into the What If universe, in which the Hydra Stomper was controlled by the Red Room. Then there's the Kahori episode, which is probably the most detached thing from not just What If, but the Marvel Cinematic Universe in general, because she's a brand new character. I like how this episode had respect to Native American culture. All the characters in this show spoke their native tongue, but I gotta say, I'm also kind of getting tired of characters getting their powers from an Infinity Stone, particularly the Tesseract, because as much as a cool character Kahori is, I just feel like she did kind of get a bit overpowered at times. But overall, I did enjoy this episode. This is definitely the MVP episode of the season. Then there's the Hela episode, in which basically is Thor Ragnarok and Shang-Chi splat with each other, in which Hela, she gets banished to Earth. She meets Wenwu of the Ten Rings, and then she learns to be a good person. And this episode also just proves how much of a shitty father Odin is. Then the second to last episode is the 1602 Avengers, in which is just 2 universes colliding with each other. And it's basically the medieval Avengers. All the right people except Captain Carter, who is the main one that is out of time. We get Angry Hogan again. And this episode mainly just showcases more of Captain Carter and how much of a resilient person she is, which I do appreciate. And then the last episode, which is the season finale, in which Doctor Strange Supreme, he comes back and he's collecting universe killers and righteous heroes for this little thing that he's trying to feed, just so he can resurrect his universe, just so he can resurrect Christine. Now, off jump, I was a little bit like, really, this again? Like, why we gotta keep going back to evil Doctor Strange? But then by the end of the episode, you realize that he's just keep getting consumed by grief, and it also parallels Captain Carter, which, as much as she is lost, she doesn't let that consume her. She just keeps moving forward and just keeps being resilient, which clearly Doctor Strange is not working out. And it was fun seeing all those different characters, and it was also fun watching Captain Carter interact with Kahori and further solidifying how much of a character Kahori could be going forward. Now, overall, I really did enjoy the hell out of What If Season 2. Now, I'm still thinking about which season I like more, but I say this season, it kind of took a dip towards the end, but then it picked back up. So I'll say this one was just a little bit more fun, and it still had a strong start. Whereas with season 1, it had its depressing episodes, but you at least saw the vision of how everything connected together. But What If Season 2, it was enjoyable watching all the characters from the first season come back and seeing their stories continued and how they play into all the other different universes. And seeing them in all the other different universes. And if there's going to be a season 3, I am more than excited to see what else this show has to offer. I'm going to give What If Season 2 the heart eyes emoji.